Welcome to Duncan Thorin Shield's YouTube channel.
After this time period, when we came off the internet, obviously the major came. It was PGL Stockholm. And if people remember, nobody, by the way, spoiler, it was the same now in PGL, but even back then, it was surprising to some people. PGL's approach is very different. They don't like reach out to everyone, see who's available, or like just start pre-talks. They sort of like, it's like they just, because I was involved actually with some of the hiring for this, they actually just sort of decide who they're hiring, and then that's it. They just contact those people like, congrats, like you're at the major. Like, what? Okay. And then the other people, you're just waiting, like, my joke is like by the phone, it never rings. It's like, oh shit. So in your case, I will say, and by the way, despite what everyone has read on the internet, I didn't say to just hire all men or to only hire those people. I have the DMs to prove it with the CEO of PGL. So get at me, people who want to say nonsense on the internet. Maybe they used to have a job at NIP. Hopefully whatever have a job again. So what I'll just say is this. I did actually, it's literally, I've got the DM. I told the person who was the top person at PGL who was asking who should I hire, I gave him a list of analysts, commentators. Then when it came to interviewers, I literally said the first two names was Frankie, because I just can't help being too legit. That's my problem, guys. So, okay, I'll put Frankie there, even though we all know all the rest. It does need to go up now. I put Frankie and I also put Freya. And unfortunately, they hired neither. And then that famous event thing came out, which even though I said I was involved in hiring, I mean, as in I suggested who I thought should be hired at the beginning of the process. When that image came out, here's the talent for the major. Obviously, the first thing everyone thought was, mate, you haven't hired a single woman. Like, you don't even have to go on some political angle. It's like, some of them are the best at that job, though, man. Like, you know, like, especially like things like desk host and interviewer. Like, it's not like it's hard to find one, is it? So, when that whole backlash happened, there was like a week or two where people were like, what the fuck? It's just misogyny. Like, it's just old school. They hate women. They're keeping them out. The maddest angle was people trying to say it was like women wouldn't work with me and Richard or whatever. It's just like, yeah, all right, love, pull the other one. So the one I would ask you is this, though. I don't want to make it political, but I want to ask it this way. It did make it, I thought, a bit unfortunate, though, that when they then hired you, it just looked like, even though I know you're one of the best, I'd put you top two. It made it look like they're cynically adding you so that they can no longer have backlash that you're a woman. What would you say to that? Because that felt a bit awkward to me. You know, I'd rather you were just there at the beginning.
I remember getting the email to ask it if I was available. And just to like preface the whole thing, I had zero expectation that I would get hired for that event. At the time, we'd just come out of COVID. Obviously, FLASHPOINT was mostly online. I've been doing, at that point, a little bit of blast off here and there. But I had no relationship with PGL. I'd never worked with them before. Right. There were plenty of other people that they had established those relationships with. And I think that is important, to work with people you trust and work with people you know, and work with people that you think are going to do the best in the role, which is a subjective opinion. Everybody has different strengths, weaknesses. Everybody has different relationship with production, which I think is something massively important between talent and a TO, is having those producer-presenter relationships. So I had no expectation that I would be involved. And I think that's also something that, I never want to get to that point where I think I'm owed something. I think that's...
It's dangerous,
just from
right?
my perspective, it's very dangerous.
Even if you're the best, I'd say the problem is you will then just feel so entitled to the event. It'll make you bitter if you don't get hired, if you know what I mean. Yes,
and it's the danger of becoming complacent as well, thinking that you are entitled to everything, which just isn't the case, right? You've got to show that you'll continue to grow and work hard as a person. And not saying that PGL maybe didn't think that. Like I know that events, they want to hire faces that they know. And people that they feel like will fulfill what they want to, the event they want to put on. And I had never even met any of the guys in person before. So coming into it, had no expectation. And because they kind of said they were going with the, old school lineup, I was like, Smix, she'll be the one to be a part of the event. Totally makes sense. And then obviously the announcement came out and there was the backlash, which I think it's important to have representation, but at the same time, I think it's equally as important to have the best people in the positions, doing the job, which kind of goes up to your point of, there were women that could have been there. It was just turned out that they didn't want to go down that route, and I don't think it was anything malicious or sexist that made them do that. I don't think they were actively avoiding.
I got the
women.
sense they just didn't know how to be perceived. You know what I mean?
Yes, yeah, exactly. They just went with the people that they had those relationships with, and that's fair enough. There wasn't any sort of negative intention from that, and I felt like it was kind of not being dragged into that necessarily, but then I was getting DMs from people saying, "Why aren't you working PGL?" And I was like, "Well, I've never worked with them before. I don't even know whether they have my email.
Sure.
Like, how would I even get in contact with them?" But then in the same vein, I was like, I'm sure they have a contact for Frankie, who was working, obviously, with the ESL events at the time. Smix as well. I know they'd worked with her in the past. So maybe that was more of the shock to me, that they wouldn't have gone for somebody like that. But I think it's a dangerous line to walk, going, because they had somebody else that was incredibly experienced in that role as well. So it shouldn't be a case of picking somebody because they fit a certain quota. But then obviously they came and sent me an email and said, "Do you want to stage host?" Which of course I was like immediately like, yes, of course I want to do that. Or that would be amazing. I'm surprised, I'm even being reached out to now. And I don't know whether, I don't know the intricacies of how things changed from Challengers and Legends into playoffs, because you guys were in Romania.
Yes,
doing it,
remote.
doing it remotely. And I'd heard whisperings that the plan was for you guys to stay there.
Yeah, it was.
And that was going to be, that was going to be it. And then how it was kind of worded was, now we're actually going to have talent on site. It makes sense to have more of a stage presence. We need somebody else alongside James Banks to be doing this. And I was like, that's totally fair enough. Maybe they've just reevaluated everything and thought, if everybody's going to be here, we want to have a bit more crowd interaction. We want to be able to do pre and post game with both teams. Like you can't physically just have poor James running around and doing all of those things, because at some point you're going to have to be doing two things at the same time. So that was my kind of, I guess, thinking behind it. And I did, spoke to a couple of friends and said, is it going to come off as just being a kind of token hire? Is that how this is going to be perceived if I say yes? And they were like, even if it is, you get to work the fucking major.
True.
Like, don't let that put you off, even if that is the case, which, I mean, I met everybody on site. It didn't seem that way to me. It seemed like their reasoning was, we've just kind of realized how much more responsibility we're putting on ourselves now that everybody's going to be on site. We need an additional person.
Right.
So that was kind of my thinking of it. I never really asked anybody, because I didn't really,
It's a bit awkward, isn't it?
it didn't really bother me.
Sure.
Yeah, and it wasn't really my concern. It was like, well, I'm here, and hopefully I'm going to prove that I'm doing a good enough job, even if there were concerns about that. And then I got to do the desk hosting in Antwerp. So for me, it kind of felt like, okay, I've sort of proved myself to these people. I've proved that I'm all right to work with. And they do want to continue that relationship forwards to Antwerp as well. But yeah, it was a strange kind of thing to be involved with, particularly when I had no expectation of even being there in the first place.
I always think that particular major, that actually for real, for me, might actually be the event that stands out the most in my mind now. Not least because, if you remember, because we'd missed those 2020 majors, Valve rolled the prize money. It was $2 million. Then it literally brought, to this day, it's still the highest viewed major ever, because everyone was watching. It's also perfect. You have Na'Vi and G2. These are giant orgs. You have Nico and Simple and the fact you couldn't basically script it better because to me, the whole thing about that event was, it wasn't just a major. It was like Counter-Strike's actually back. Because remember, before that, ESL did those small ones where they kept going, it's LAN, and there was like no crowd. They're just in like a tournament area. And it's like, sort of is, but when you say LAN in Counter-Strike, you mean a stadium, like that massive arena with all booming sound. Like, to me, that really is a special event. Like that one, part of the idea as well was sort of like, we're going to like entertain the world again. I think it had a really cool like sort of vibe to that. What did you think?
Yeah, definitely. And particularly we were just talking about, the that bar area in the Globe Arena, like being able to just come into that area again and see all the talent, all the players, all the fans. Like it really did feel like we were actually back, because as you said, it had been teased. Like some people had done it just with the teams and players, but it was almost surreal because we'd sort of heard those whisperings so many times, and for it to actually be happening was just wild. And I remember going out on stage doing the first opener, and this was a Thursday, bear in mind. And it was when I walked out, did the welcome, and then Get Right brought out the trophy. And I remember saying to him, you know, like, it might be really loud. As I said to you with the Zywu thing, I'm going to tell you the 2 questions I'm going to ask you. And he was like, no. I want it to be really off the cuff.
I remember this.
Don't tell me. I want it to be really off the cuff. And so I was like, okay, you know, fair enough. If that's what you want, I'm not going to spoil that for you. I'm not going to spoil that moment in front of your home crowd. And he walks out. I asked him the first question. And he was like, what? Because it was mind-blowingly loud. He couldn't hear anything. I don't even know whether he actually heard the question that I asked. He ended up getting super emotional, obviously, because it was, you know, it's his country. So for it to be back in Sweden, like for the first time in what had been a year and a half, was kind of a magical moment for him. But I'll never forget how loud it was on that Thursday. That was just like we are actually back. I don't think I actually believed it was going to happen until that moment that I walked out and I was like, holy shit, like this is real.
One thing that people might not know is if you track, as we've done this interview, the people you work with, so you start with FACEIT, you do a bit of DreamHack Open, you do FLASHPOINT, you get in with Blast, you've done PGL now. There's obviously one very conspicuous name missing. They have 70% of the calendar. It's called ESL. And everyone knows, no matter what you might think of them, they are the best. Like, that is the top. People want to be at Katowice, Cologne. There's a reason why I've done that whole category where I consider them like they need to be like near the majors even, I think, for players. And everyone, like people, you see, do people cry when they lose Katowice nowadays? It's not even a major. Like, so when you then in 2023 get to do IEM Katowice, this must be a big moment.
Oh yeah, that was that was wild because I'd been there a couple of times prior, once just as a fan, and then once to do the Intel Challenge, which was kind of ESL Impact before ESL Impact was a thing. It was the women's tournament. So I'd been there. It was Potter on the desk with Miss Harvey and Lottie Van Prague, who now does she was doing a lot of Call of Duty, but she now does Halo. She was hosting it, and it was really wholesome. It was wonderful, and I think CLG Red won it, or it might have been Team Dignitas at the time. But that was a really cool experience because the grand final for that was on the Saturday, so it meant that my flights ended up being booked for the Monday. So I just got to sit and bask in the glory of the Spodek for the grand final on Sunday for the men's tournament, and that was just a wild experience because I think there's something about like the bowl-shaped arenas which just like extra goosebumps because you think you know how large they are, but it's not until you are standing dead center on the floor looking up and just seeing vast rows of people, and it almost looks like they're sort of looming over and it can sort of fall over at any time. Like, just the scale is something that I can't describe. And that was one of those moments where I was just like, okay, like if I really work hard, one day I might be doing this. Like, maybe one day, like, just dream big and make this a goal. Obviously that and Cologne are kind of the two big ones of the calendar and the biggest historical events. And for Cologne as well, it was a tournament that I go to every year just to watch. It's not a far flight from London, and you can get like a nice little cheap Ryanair flight over there. So I'd go there pretty much every year with a group of friends. But Spodek was amazing. That was the last year that they ended up doing the remote studio. So that was when there was like the green screen setup, because that had been kind of the staple studio layout during COVID.
Yes.
And it was just one of the last things to get moved. So it kind of wasn't until the year after that I got to experience the real gravity of actually having the desk in the arena, hearing the crowd behind you, having your voice out to the crowd, which is something where, obviously because of COVID, but just because of how TOs have kind of changed up the format a little bit. There's a lot of in-arena entertainment going on now, whereas back in the day, you were the in-arena entertainment. Yes. I remember going to Cologne in 2015 and it was just desk segment up on the screen.
Yep.
that was it, right? There wasn't anything else going on in the crowd, whereas obviously things have evolved, and there's now, Parler interacting with fans in there. There's local hosts as well, saying things in the native language, doing giveaways, like sponsor segments. There's a lot going on. So it's even more special when they do switch on your mic in the arena. And that feeling isn't something I've got to feel a lot, but it hits every single time. Like the goosebumps from that is wild. And Katowice is always an arena where the crowd, without fail, you ask them to cheer, they will blow the roof off. Same with Cologne. It's such a privilege to get to be, part of a show in like the most historic venues in CS.
As you referenced earlier, we're bouncing a little bit around on the timeline here because I can keep the topic script together. When Antwerp came around, you didn't just get hired. You're the desk host. Like you're at the best job that you do. You're not doing like, you can come, but then do the interviews, or you can come, but be the stage. Now you get to actually just do your thing, right? This must be kind of like validating moment.
Yes. Oh, massively. This was like, one of the bucket list goals was hosting playoffs of a major where, as I was saying, the desk is broadcast to the arena. Like PGL were doing that intermittently with some other stuff, but that was so surreal. And to be surrounded by, obviously, Pimp and Maniac were there, Scrawny and Launders were there as well. It was kind of one of those moments where I looked around and everybody was going through some sort of pinch me moment at the same time. It felt like a real collective. We could look around and go like, we fucking made it.
You also
like,
were the online generation.
It.
Yeah. This was like kind of your class coming to graduation, right?
I remember we took a photo, which I think somebody sent to Mark Winter, which was Dreamhack Open class of 2019.
Right.
Like, look at us now. Like we're actually, Harry and Hugo were there as well.
Yeah.
Which was just wild. Really cool venue. Obviously one of the biggest capacity venues we've ever been to. A crowd there were just absolutely magical. And yeah, they had like one really cool thing about that arena in particular was they had all these kind of booths for different kinds of partners. Like FACEIT had a big booth there because we were doing there was like a Gucci Gaming Academy launch that was kind of happening in tandem there. So there was loads of people from that. There was basically people from all different parts of the esports and Counter-Strike ecosystem in these booths with the most beautiful view to the stage. I think they did a really good job of kind of setting up the arena at that event. And yeah, definitely one of those moments that I'll never forget. And being able to share that in conjunction with so many people that kind of all started at the same time it was magic.
This is a tricky question, so we'll address it a little bit abstractly perhaps, and you can say what you want to say. This is where you then went on a streak of doing all the majors. So you did PGL Antwerp, you did IEM Rio, you did Blast Paris. Notice these are all different TOs. And then obviously, this last one now, you didn't get hired for, you didn't do it. No, publicly, there'll never be a reason why. No, that's the sort of thing that people used to have to live with. Here's the question I have. The reason why I myself was a little bit shocked by that is because I actually had you and Maniac as the unicorns of talent in that you're the only people, as far as I know, have never had any kind of private or public blow up with a TO or any sort of drama moment. You're probably the easiest people to work with ever. And so actually it makes perfect sense to me as to why you're on every event nowadays. You just get hired for them all. In this kind of a scenario, how do you handle when you're on the streak, you're doing it all, everyone's probably telling you're great at your job, I'm sure you're feeling satisfied. How do you handle it when you sort of don't get the call? You don't get to work it. What do you do?
I think it kind of goes back to our point earlier about I don't ever want to feel like I'm owed anything, particularly as a Thorin organizer. As I was saying, I've kind of only really done one whole event with them, which was back at Antwerp. And there's kind of two sides to this. There's a part of me which is like, I don't ever want to feel like I'm entitled to do anything. I always want to be proving to people that I'm a viable option. But again, TOs are entitled to hire whoever they want. And look at who they did hire. They brought Richard Lewis back, which is amazing. And then you've got Shox, who is one of the goated desk hosts across all of esports. She's been doing it far longer than I have, and I think we're pretty blessed to have her coming into Counter-Strike as well. And I've learned a lot from her too. Like, got to work. she was obviously the rear major, but she's been at multiple Colognes and Catos in kind of the sideline role. I think the first Cologne I did, I was doing sideline and she was desk hosting. And it's amazing to get to chat with her, not only on a personal level, but professionally. Like, she's got a lot of really valuable insight that she's willing to share. So I think, you know, it's always difficult to not get asked for things, but at the same time, still got to do like a different role of HFTV in it, which was fun. And I don't feel like, I don't know how to word this properly. I don't feel like this was like my last shot at working a major, you know?
Okay.
Like, it feels like sometimes this happens, and as you said, I was on the streak of basically doing everything, and I hadn't really had to handle any adversity with that. And I knew it was going to come at some point. I knew it's not possible to do absolutely everything. And I think there's also an argument for not having, you know, viewers get fatigued with seeing the same faces. People want to bring a different vibe to their broadcast sometimes. And I'm very lucky that I get to do so much ESL. I've gotten to do so much Blast. So I don't think, I don't know. I don't, like, it's always tricky, particularly being the first CS2 major, but I do think, I hope that this isn't the definitive end of anything. It doesn't feel like it, to me at least. It feels like that I've still got that same hunger, still got the drive, still want to be part of these events, and I don't see that stopping going forward. So that's kind of how I looked at it in my head before I knew who they had actually hired to fill the role. And then when I saw they had, totally makes sense. If you're going to go with that kind of angle of things, totally makes sense to get Richard Lewis, who's, you know, being able to have his comeback at a major is pretty badass. And then Shocks, obviously they worked with in Antwerp as well, which made sense being her home country. And yeah, she's an absolute gem and lovely person to be around and work with.
Whenever people talk about the word ego, they nearly always mean someone whose ego's out of control. They mean, like, you know, like, calm it down, like, stop being such a diva or something, right? But I once heard a great line, which is that you definitely don't want to have no ego, though. Like, ego tells you whose mouth to put the food into when you're all eating at dinner. It's a great line, isn't it, right? So I often think when you do the job like this, or if you're a pro player, I mean, people understand that thing with pro players where they'll often give an interview that makes them look silly. Like, they'll be like, I actually think I am the best in the world at this. And then everyone's like, bro, bring up the stats. Like, no, you're not, you idiot. Blah, blah. But what they mean is that mindset-wise, they want to believe in the game they're the best. And that the guy they're playing, they can beat him. It doesn't matter if his stats and his fame, and you know, all that's better. So similarly, right, if you're going to be talent, I mean, I'll give you another way to describe it. Someone once said the reason why everyone who's like a stand-up comedian or an actor is a bit fucked up is because who else would want essentially to say, right, everyone in this room is going to be quiet and only I'm going to speak? Like, there's got to be something behind that, you know. That's not just a beautiful I'm a servant of the people. No, there's a part that's like, you know, I want to be heard. I want to have my chance in the spotlight. You know, I'm good at what I do. I've worked on my craft, right? There's good reasons to think you're very good. So if I ask you this very special way, right, I'm going to frame it specially, right? In Counter-Strike, I know all these people, known them for years. I've worked in other games even. Right, in Counter-Strike, right, Richard is really, really good, but he's been out of the game for ages. He's like, this is his first event in years. Shocks is amazing. She might be the desk host of esports, but her game's League of Legends, and CS is one that she comes into time to time. That's like her mistress, I guess. She comes to it occasionally. She likes it, she loves it, but then she goes back to, she's faithful to League of Legends. She goes back to that, and she's back on the LEC, she's back on Worlds, etc. And obviously her thing is she isn't a native fan in the same way you are. She's someone who likes the game as a side game, and then she does, if people don't know, she's fucked tons of homework. Like, she really does have that iPad with like a million notes in. In your case, right, if I combine all the factors, in terms of desk hosts who are native to Counter-Strike, they've done the events, they've put in the graph, they've leveled up, they've worked with everyone. Can Freya say she is the best desk host? For yourself, not for anyone else. For you.
I was gonna pose the question to you. How would you quantify that? Because I just think, like, with a player, it's very easy to say who the best player is because there's a quantifiable element of numbers where you can rank things. Whereas for what we do, it would be like asking, like, any of the talent, like, who's the best analyst, who's the best commentator. Like, it's really subjective as to,
of course,
what you like and what you mesh with and the type of person you are. Like, I think when you accept that you're not going to be everybody's cup of tea all the time, that can be quite freeing, and it can allow you to become more authentic version of yourself, because in the end of the day, you should be doing this for you, right? Like, I think there's an element of obviously serving the community and doing the community and the game justice. But at the end of the day, you're the person that has to live with your decisions and how you choose to portray yourself. So I don't know how I would actually quantify. Like, how would you view?
Let me ask you. I'll give you an example. Watch. I'll do what I do. So if you've ever seen what I say in interviews and on Twitter, is I always pick whoever I think at the moment's cooking, and I say they're the best, right? So famously, I would always say Yanko's the best, and then Sponge came along. I said Sponge is the best. Maybe now I would pick Maniac. Maybe I would crown him and give him that status. But that difference is that's when I'm sort of addressing like, here's my public opinion on who I think should be the best, and I'm doing a mix there of what I think someone's really good, and also I think, they've sort of, like I say, they've got the resume, they've got the status. I also think everyone else sort of to some degree thinks they're very good, and I'm just kind of like, I'm crystallizing that particular moment. But here's the difference, Freya. If it's 5 seconds before we go live and I'm on the desk, I'm not only the best, I'm the only person who could do what I'm about to do. That's my mindset. That's why I'll never ever choke. I'll never worry about, is this joke going to go over? Why? In fact, one of the ways I was able to never feel nervous is I would just think to myself, like, think about some of the other people who might be here. Maybe they'd mess it up. Maybe they wouldn't even do a good job. You know what? I'm going to nail this. So fuck it. I'm going in. So you inside, do you feel like, do you have that confidence that you can do the best job? You can be the best?
I think it's separate from being like the best, because I think it's just a really, like, it's so hard to compare. If we're just going to go with West Coast, right? Like, everybody has their own USP, right? Like, and I think that's kind of where you can distinguish yourself as a host. I think something that I've always worked on is because I did a lot of scripting, and I've loved creative writing, majored in English, sort of ins and out, the intros, the outros, the throws, trying to make those a little bit creative, have those hooks, which I've had, help from a lot of people around me, production staff included, with that, of being able to set that up in the right way. If I'm going to use this certain phrase, let's get some B-roll to match it. Like, you'll notice on most IEM events, and actually EPL as well, we'll do the team arrivals. So today, in Chengdu, it was Heroic versus Liquid, and it's like, okay, I've got this bit of script. Can I have the Liquid arrival first, focusing on Cadian, and then can we go into Heroic? Because it just matches what I'm saying, which is something where I feel like I've wanted to nurture that. I really enjoy it, and I think that's a kind of unique aspect, not unique, an area of the broadcast where I have more of a strength and I can put that time into, right? Like, it does take time to write those. I really enjoy doing it, and I want to kind of craft that as my part of my identity. Whereas you've got somebody like Richard Lewis, who is incredibly, like, he's hilarious as a person, super witty, like very off the cuff, fast thinker. Like, that's why people love watching him. So I don't think you can compare something of, okay, there's more of a maybe creative writing element of what I'm doing versus the wit and the humor of somebody like him versus with Shocks. You hit the nail on the head where she's so meticulous in her research. Like, she's got all the numbers, she's got all the notes, and she has the most amazing memory. Like, she can speak, I think, 4 or 5 languages now. Just having a mind like that is something so unique. So that's kind of her, I think one of her strong suits is that memory element. And you've seen some of the monologues she's been able to do on League of Legends, which is just a craft in its own. So I think that's where I have the trouble of comparing people. I think in different areas, some people are strong in. I think some of my biggest weaknesses, some of other people's biggest strengths. And I think that extends out to all of the talent, right? Like, I was just thinking, like, okay, who is the best analyst? Like, I don't know. Depends on what kind of segment we're doing. Depends on what type of vibe we're going for. So I think I've always struggled to look at it in that way of, like, comparatively, like, who's first, who's second, who's third. Just because it's quite it's really up to interpretation and what kind of vibe you want at an event, which I think is where you can't get too salty if you're not hired, because maybe they're just going for a different vibe. Like, maybe they just looked at you and gone like, they looked at me and gone, we want some more kind of humor and wit injected into it. Who do we get that from?
Okay. Maybe that's a bit of a masculine drive to want to be the monkey at the top of the tree, looking down on the rest of them, like, I'm the boy now, I'm the king. Maybe that's just my thing. Okay. What about this then? A question I have about especially your like persona on camera is one thing I've noticed that I actually think makes you quite unique. I actually think other people have their own flair and they choose what they're going to do with their wardrobe and their look and their image, etc. But I've noticed your image, it tends to be, it's kind of classy. It's kind of like a smart business kind of a look. I noticed a lot of your outfits you go for. Is this intentional? Is that something about the image you want to project?
Yeah, I think I've always been, just in terms of my dress sense, my mom was a huge influence with this. Like we used to go shopping together. She loved clothes. She was always the person I would go to for any kind of like wardrobe advice for any on camera stuff. I remember like shopping with her for the first dresses I was going to wear for ECS. And she was a very, classy woman, could like get dressed up, but it was always like quite chic, and I've always thought I kind of wanted to replicate that. I think there's also there's kind of two elements. It has to be practical and functional, whatever you're wearing, because particularly now, there's quite a keen interest for TOs to have a flexible desk. So we're not always just standing with headsets on anymore. Sometimes we've got IFBs, sometimes we've got Madonna mics, sometimes we've got handhelds. So from a practical standpoint for women, sometimes certain types of clothing just aren't going to work, because where am I going to clip my IFB? What if my talk back is on my IFB? It's not on the microphone, so I need it to be accessible. Like there's all these sort of intricacies. And then there's also what the set behind me looks like, which is where I struggle, because I love wearing black and usually the set's quite dark. So you need like a little pop of color to kind of distinguish yourself and add that depth. So yeah, there's kind of a couple of layers you have to think about, but I think I've always been more into kind of it's kind of why I love like Scandinavia and Denmark in particular. Like I think their style is like the sort of tailored masculine is beautiful. That's something I've always really fucked with. And I think an easy way around that is like a blazer and like skirt cord or like a suit, something like that. That's practical in terms of actual audio equipment, but also can add a sort of professional edge to it, like Matthew does, right? Like he's big on the suits. I think he's kind of elevated the game in terms of the cufflinks and the pocket squares and the tie matching all of these elements. Like it's fun. I think it's really fun, especially to coordinate with people on the desk as well.
People might have noticed now that it's actually become a bizarre meta within esports, that even though the TOs in theory tell you, please do not swear, keep it, like PG friendly, etc. Like not only is it allowed, like if anyone saw the recent major, they kept handing the mic to fans and they were all fuck, because it's in Denmark, right? So they would say that 1 million times anyway. But also the meta of broadcast is, because you're not supposed to do it, and everyone knows, though, that if you have, like, the major winning moment, you can sometimes use it as, like, a point of emphasis to make it, like, epic, like, and they fucking did it, finally. You could do some shit like that, basically. So, as a result, though, if people do swear, though, I think it becomes more noticeable. And obviously, people might not know this. It might shock them because they've seen so much of my videos. They'll think this isn't true. I've almost never sworn on camera when I'm working at analyst events. I've sworn, look, I say the other words 1 billion times. I have to take them out. They get me demonetized nowadays. But on the actual events, because I came up in the era when it was really early on and everyone told you, don't swear, like, I mean, I was even on TV where they told you each swear literally is like a $10,000 fine from the FTC or something. Once we get 3, it goes up to, and I was like, okay, so you never see me swear that. I maybe did it like once or twice on, I don't know, like a Star Ladder or something random where I thought I could get away with it, right? But I have to say, I'd almost never seen you on camera swear. And then you had that mad one where it was just about like the fantasy or the predictions or something. And you were like, I'm fucking going off. Did you mean that? Did that just slip out in that moment? Did it slip out? I
think like some off-broadcast Freya came out.
Okay.
I think that was one of those days where it was like 3 best of 3s. They were fucking like 7 overtimes. Like, those days where like times the broadcast mask slips a little bit and there's a bit of you let out. But I agree with the emphasis element. I think as long as you're not doing it every segment or, every day, arguably, I think maybe a couple of times a broadcast you can do it. Just add that little pop. I think that's totally fine. I think basically everybody, commentary's a different beast, but I think on the desk you can, and obviously stage hosting is completely different and interviews, but on the desk, it's a good kind of wake everybody up sometimes if you throw that in there. Kind of makes people go, oh, okay, like she really means this. Matthew does it as well. Like he's got such beautiful poetic language, and then sometimes he'll drop an F-bomb in there, and it makes you sort of stand to attention a bit more and go like, oh, okay, like he's starting something here. So I don't think it's something that you should use too liberally. But yes, I remember that. I remember it was when like we'd all picked the same teams for both games, or all 3 games, and we were all wrong.
Oh, all right.
So it was like, this is going to make it on CS Unfortunate or something. Like it's going to be clipped on Reddit. Like let's make it clipped for a good reason, not just laughing at all of us.
I want to ask a little bit of a deep lore question, which is if anyone follows Freya's Instagram, check it out, Freya Spiers at Instagram. If they go there, there's a trope that you use, and it's like your running joke, which is because people love to do that thing where, you go to the famous one's the Eiffel Tower. Obviously, you go to the Eiffel Tower and then you go down that road. And then what you do is you put your fingers back in the background like you're holding it, like, haha. But the thing is, though, obviously people do it with the Eiffel Tower, Big Ben, I know, New York, whatever, that State Tower or whatever, like, these are classic ones, right? But the gag is, because you've done it so many times, now you do it with like the sun, or like you do it intentionally so your fingers aren't even on the thing in the background, like, and it's some sort of weird meta joke that you just kept running for. Why do you do that? And is that a bit of your real personality bleeding out? Are you silly?
Yeah, I think so. It's kind of started from, I think it was in Rio the first time I went, and we went and saw Christ the Redeemer. And I sort of did it as just a bit an off the cuff. Like, obviously, you've got to set up the angle quite right if you're going to do it and actually hold it. Like, it takes a really long time to do it. And I was just like, oh, it's just kind of funnier if it's just completely loose. So did it, and then watched a line of probably 50 people behind me think that they could also do it, and just seeing the look of confusion on their face, being like, wait, but it doesn't work, like what? But like everybody had started doing it in this area, and it was like, man, if I could do that here, I can do that anywhere. Okay. And you see people every time I do it, somebody is just like, oh, like I can do this, I can like hold this in this way.
So you're trolling them a bit.
Yeah, literally, yeah. And then somebody did a funny edit of the Agent K skin also doing like a love heart back to me. People have taken this reference. I only did it like this because it kind of works with anything, but there's also a sort of other side to that reference which I did. It wasn't intentional, a bit more how do I put this politely? I think you can kind of get the gist of what somebody would be doing if they were doing this.
A bit of a suggestive gesture, sure.
A bit suggestive, yes, exactly. Wasn't the intention.
Oh, right.
But it's kind of been taken to that way. I was sort of doing it like this and leaning on shit. But yeah, it's just kind of stupid and funny to see people then try to replicate it, but like actually seriously. Wasn't meant to be that deep, and then just sort of kept on doing it, and now we're here.
I want to ask you a fun little set of questions at the end. It goes like this. For Pimp and Maniac, your erstwhile desk compatriots for so many years, as you say, grinding in the Dreamhack Opens, in the slums of Dreamhack Open, to the heights of the major and being on the major final, doing all those blasts, etc. together, and IEMs, right? If someone was to make a movie about this like underdog story, which actor would play Pimp and which actor would play Maniac? You pick the actor and then the reason why.
Oh God. You've caught me off guard with this. I am maybe the worst at knowing actors' names.
Oh, if you can tell me the film, I'll tell you the name. Think of a film or a character you're thinking of, and I'll tell you who the actor was.
I don't know why Maniac's giving me like Matt Damon vibes a little bit. He's giving me that, but like I don't know why. It's not really his personality at all, is it?
Okay.
Who would Jacob be like? Somebody that's have you watched I just finished Succession recently.
Oh, sure.
Have you watched that?
Yeah.
You know Roman, the second or third brother.
I'm not actually sure if that. If Pimp's watching this is like that might low-key be a diss actually, Pimp, because I can't. I don't know. Okay, that actor would be good though, sure.
Like him,
no, sure.
The personality of like,
right, the super blonde. Yeah, sure.
It's so Jacob, and it's hilarious. Like I think he is my favorite character of that show.
That's good then. That's good.
Just because of his character development is so funny. Yeah, I'd put him. I don't even know that actor's name.
I don't either, but fair enough.
He's a funny guy.
Oh, I think it's actually the brother of Macaulay Culkin. I think it was actually something Culkin, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it's Macaulay Culkin's brother.
Yeah.
Who would Magic? No, Magic needs to be somebody more
suave, I'm guessing.
Poetic.
Okay.
Yeah, suave.
What sort of films do you think of then? What sort of
actor.
a film character would he be, do you think?
Why am I thinking of like? He doesn't look like Leo.
Leonardo DiCaprio? Okay.
That kind of, yeah.
Maybe I can love that reference as well. He'd appreciate that, I'll tell you right. Oh, yeah.
I think he would, yeah. I think like the dress sense is the key thing. And I think he does look quite suave in a lot of things.
Sure.
Yeah, I'll go with that. The two totally different sides of the spectrum. I'm sorry, Jacob, but watch Succession till the end and you'll see why.
All right, okay. Right. People might know, even though I said it as a joke, I actually then doubled down because it was my style. That is essentially the Thorin MO. And I did a whole video where I explained why I said I am esports. Because what I was trying to explain to people was when you have these big furores where people outside of esports try and say things like, hey, this person shouldn't work, or who are you? What did you ever do? And it's like, mate, we built esports. What are you talking about? Like, we're all there on the ground floor. Like, we're like the people who built the pyramids, mate. Like, all of us were there moving the blocks. And so in this scenario, right? I mean, as in, like, I'm an OG in esports, and I was there from the very beginning when no one believed it was no money. There was no reason to be there except you just like the games, right? I would say in a similar sense, even though you came from way back as a fan and you were just watching, you had the envious jersey, and then it was cool to get on some events, and gradually you've built up, and it's only the last few years you've kind of accelerated and hit this warp speed and gone to the absolute top. If you think about how many majors you've hosted, I don't think you might have probably even looked this up yourself. There's a lot of majors that have been hosted by different people. There's not that many have hosted as many as you. You've also worked tons of events. Like I said, you worked for every major TO at this point in time as well. If I say Freya is Counter-Strike in the same sense, you're one of the people of Counter-Strike, one of the faces that people think of, iconic. Does it feel real? Do you accept it? Are you Counter-Strike?
No, it doesn't feel real at all. It's so surreal to, like you said, I think sometimes everybody gets guilty of being wrapped up in the kind of ecosystem that we're with and just going, okay, next event. Like you'll never, and I don't think you will ever be satisfied with what you've achieved, right? I think that's like where a lot of the drive and hunger comes from. But you do need to take a moment to just look back and reflect on what you've done. And I didn't do that until probably about this time last year when I was forced to take some time out through no choice of my own. I had to take some time off, and it was like, okay, shit, I'm really scared I'm going to lose everything because of, having to just step out for a little bit. Didn't happen, of course. It's just a stupid thing you kind of build up in your head. But it made me look back and just go like, did I ever think that I would ever achieve any of this when I started? Like, even before I started, I was never a person I'd never done public speaking before. I was always a pretty quiet kid by, the grand scheme of things. Wasn't the sort of center of attention person by any stretch. Wasn't really interested in performing per se. And it made me reflect and go like, tell 15-year-old, 10-year-old Freya that she would be doing this. Like, you have to take some time to just appreciate what you've done. And I think Counter-Strike, I mean, esports in general, but Counter-Strike specifically moves at such lightning speed. And we go from event to event to event. And we kind of collectively get guilty of forgetting what's happened previously. So I think that moment was very important for me to reflect and go, like, you've done so much more than you ever thought you would. Which is where it gets kind of wild to actually think about what that means in kind of the grand scheme of CS history. Because for me, when you say, someone is Counter-Strike, for me, like Anders screams out in my head because his voice is so associated with it, or Machine, because there's nothing that man can't do, right? Desk hosting into commentary into stage hosting. If you could clone that man, like we'd be set. Somebody like Chad, who's played and then moved into analysis and now in one of the best commentary duos. Those are the people that I would associate. And it's always a pinch me moment to go, I get to work alongside names like that. I don't know. I think it is important. It's something like a lot of talent talk about, particularly recently. It's just been kind of being able to take a step back and go, you know what, like we've been doing good. We need to appreciate what we've kind of achieved over the past years.
At the end of this interview, do you have a final message? Is there anyone you'd like to thank or say hello to?
I'd like to shout out the people that don't get the shout outs all too often, which is all the production guys, the people that were there right from the very beginning, who the tiny weeny little FACEIT crew, into everybody that we get to work with now. I think it goes unrecognized how many people behind the scenes it takes to put on events. And if you think, the talent are on for long hours, think about how much earlier and how much later the production staff are coming in and going home. And having producers believe in my ability to do this, I wouldn't be doing this without them. So I think that's a shout I'd like to give, is to all the unsung heroes in the back, grinding away, building the sets, building the galleries. We don't know how lucky we are to have them.
In this esports world, it can seem like everyone's against you, but I've always got the Illuminati, my Patreon community, riding with me. And it is thanks to the support of the following people, this video and all of them on my channel are made possible. Matt, Pugnacho Rakula, Ahmed Haju, Frisky, Tosh, Jensen Gore, Animosity, Toucan, Tobias Bernasconi. If you've ever watched my videos, you know now I'm going to give a massive shout out to Jerky's Minion, the main man. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? You want teasers? Find out who the upcoming interview guests are. Maybe you want to ask me a question. I tend to answer them at length in my video AMA. Do you want to take part in one of those dinner discussions where we talk about what you're interested in esports? Well, if any of these perks or more appeal to you, put your money where your mouth is. Join the Illuminati today, where in the description box below is a Patreon link.